All right, folks, here we go. I'm Jerry A. Thompson, and welcome to this episode of the Pivot Play podcast. And I am here today with Stevie Coleman. And so typically when we start these things off, and I'm going to read your bio, Stevie, but it seems that a large number of my guests are people that I have a relationship with. So we just start talking, but we have a different way of getting to know each other. So I think this is important for our audience. So I'm going to go through part of your bio. So Stevie Coleman is a TV production HR director for ViacomCBS from 9 to 5 and an entrepreneur all the time. She has a career services business, StevieLColeman.com. Stevie was a career counselor from her freshman year at the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign, in my hometown, until she graduated from that same institution with her Master's of Human Resources some years later. While Stevie currently works in entertainment throughout her 10-year career, she has provided HR support within the digital media, aerospace, manufacturing, and safety solutions industry. Stevie enjoys helping people, we'll talk about that, from students to executives as they rebrand themselves, focus on new career goals, and prepare for interviews. And when Stevie has downtime, she can be found binge watching and then recreating beauty tutorials. So, hi, Stevie.
Hello.
So I want to share with the folks watching how I came to know who Stevie Coleman is. And would be through one of your relatives who is one of my golf buddies / mentees, just like little brother. And so I've been helping him along with some of his professional journey. Very qualified, very smart young man. And then he was looking at a different opportunity in his industry, and then he turned to you. So I didn't know anything about you, but I first saw you for a mock interview that you guys did. And I walked away from that just so impressed, just with the thoroughness of your questions, your approach, your counsel to him on how to prepare for this next level opportunity. And I was like, yeah, we need to have a conversation because she is like super dope. So, yeah. So I'll start with this. So who is Stevie L. Coleman?
Who am I? Yes. Well, I'm the little cousin of the person that introduced us. Mm-hmm. But, I'm originally from St. Louis. I know you live there now. And I am an HR practitioner. So I have done all things human resources on the generalist side, which means I've done a little bit of compensation, a little bit of staffing, but I always have a client group that I'm responsible for. And then I kind of run the gamut of all things HR for them. I really have a passion for like learning and development. I like that space a lot. And, like my bio said, I work in TV production currently at ViacomCBS, and I'm based in New York City, which I love. But I have, passions outside of that. So I love anything beauty related. I love makeup. I love hair. Any way I can think of to be creative is really how I decompress. So I love doing things in that realm as well. And sometimes I play on other people's faces, mostly my own, but yeah.
So that's interesting. So my audience knows that I am big on creativity, being driven by our curiosity. And if you can find, an area of your life to express creativity, I believe it makes creativity available to you in all of your life, which I think gives you a leg up. So what role does creativity play for you?
I think for me, it's like a form of relaxation. So one thing that I've said is like makeup is how I meditate. So, whenever you see me out, I will have some type of look, right? And it might be something super simple, but it's just really a really relaxing way for me to start my day before I decide to, exit and go out into the world. I think first impression. And so I want to be able to control that also.
Right.
So yeah, that's what it means to me.
Right. And so folks, StevieLColeman.com, definitely check it out. And I remember, just reviewing your website, like you can produce many looks, right? And so you just mentioned something else though, in terms of first impressions, right? And so while we're, a lot of our conversation will be around what happens, in people's, job and career life. talk about the importance or the opportunity in a first impression.
Well, you only get one, which we all know, but I think easily forget.
Right.
And so I think the way that you choose to present yourself, and if you choose to present all of you or a portion of your personality and decide kind of how to parse it out, I think depending on the situation, you need to be really mindful of how you introduce yourself to people. And that's always been really important to me and definitely something that my family ingrained in me. So I think that in a professional setting, there's like I feel like I have it down pat exactly how I want to present myself, which will be very different than, in a social situation, you're going to get a way more laid back version of me than you would at work.
Yeah. Yeah. So in that, so with that first impression, one of the things I always say to folks is pass the eye test, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think people, we know this from research that people make a lot of decisions about who and what you are just based on, visually how you appear to people. And so I think that there's definitely something to be said there. So let's just delve into some of the work that you do. In particular, was there something that drew you to HR? Because HR is kind of like dealing with legal and then like dealing with finance, right? So
Yes.
depending on what side of the conversation or what side of the table you're on, HR folks can be either the ally or the enemy. So what draws you into that as a specialty?
I think overall, I have a business major from undergrad that was, I was fascinated in kind of international business in general, but how businesses were structured was the most interesting thing to me and how it differed kind of from country to country. So that's how I picked my major. I had no idea what it meant to do with that. I didn't know what my options were. And I kind of fell into it because I was working at the Career Center from my freshman year. I had attended a National Association of Black Accountants meeting. There was a woman there who gave a presentation. She was a senior, I was a freshman, and she taught us how to build a resume. And I was like, that's interesting. I want to learn more. And she told me that the Career Center where she worked was hiring and I could do the same thing. So I applied, got the job, was very excited because I found a way to make money while at school because my parents were trying to cut the cord. And I did that for my entire undergraduate career. And then when I graduated and went to grad school, I continued that same work. In between there, I did actually an internship at the Career Center the summer between my sophomore and junior years. And so they had a grant that was to create a package for all the freshman RAs that would explain, here's all the services the Career Center offers. Here's how you can figure out what you want to do with your major. Here's a million different careers you can have, right? We have all these different workshops that we offer. We would come present them to floors, to sororities and fraternities. And so I, was working on that all summer. I was also working on putting together a crew that was going to hire the new director of marketing for the Career Center because the previous one had decided to take another opportunity. And another person on that search committee said, hey, you'd be good at HR. Had no idea who she was. She said, come to my office, have a meeting with me. She wound up being the dean of my HR master's program. And she said, I really want you to get in contact with a couple folks who are in this business already. I think that they could teach you a lot about what it means from a corporate standpoint. I talked to both people. One of them said, hey, I think you have an interesting background. Send me a resume. That ended up being my first corporate HR internship between my junior and senior years. I decided to pursue my master's degree and not take my full-time offer from that career. I spun it into a second internship with that same company, completed my master's, and then started my HR career. So really it was like a happenstance and kind of right place, right time. And as I did that first internship, it was a summer, I don't remember, summer between sophomore and junior and senior year. I really, really liked what I did because I understood what finance, legal, like, everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, you don't know this about me, but I can be very nosy. So I was like, this is great. I get to know everything. And, I'm a lifelong learner. I guess I should say that versus I'm nosy. But it was, I thought it was really a cool way to spend your career and that there were so many different facets within that HR umbrella that I really didn't know about that I could learn off.
Right. So here's what I find interesting in what you're saying so far is you're hitting on all my points, Stevie. So all the things that matter, right? So talked about passing the eye test. Another thing I speak to people about is the value of being a master communicator, which clearly you have a command of the language, right? But so now if we take that, right, and sort of these first impressions, command of language, and then topping off on the 3 A's, which I'll come back to, but they are aptitude, appetite, and attitude, right? You need to have those 3 things. But it seems in exchange that sort of kind of pivoted you towards what you're doing now is you gained almost an instant advocate, right? And so for the folks listening, and for me, when I speak of advocates, especially in the career space, it's people who are willing to put their social and political capital up on your behalf, right? They're spending what they have earned, their influence, to make something happen for you. And so probably without even thinking about it strategically that way, just in the way that you present yourself, just in the way that you communicate, just the way that you demonstrate that you have the appetite, the aptitude, and the attitude, I think that has, just, and this is the thing I think people have to know, if it's just who you are, then those things just work for you. You don't have to manufacture it. And so you've benefited from advocacy, and maybe there's another places you have as well. So in the career space, what do you see as the difference between an advocate and a coach?
An advocate is going to advocate for you naturally. You don't have to ask for it. A coach is someone that you have to seek out, or we tell you that you're going to, right? HR will say, you need a coach, right, for whatever reason, right? Sometimes it's because you need help to get to the place where you can get natural advocates because you don't have any in your corner right now. Or it could be like, hey, you're doing a great job. How about we make sure we reinforce you the things that you're already doing and take it to the next level, right? So it can be a couple different reasons why we do it. But that's the difference. Coaches you seek out, advocates, they're gonna tell everybody how amazing you are without you having to ask.
Right, which is, again, another one of my bylines is there's decisions being made about you and your career in meetings you're not invited to.
Correct.
Right.
All the time.
So who's going to be there to speak up for you? Who's going to be there to make sure that contextually, and who you are and what you're about and what your value is, someone, again, to your point, just very naturally does that. But how wonderful it is when that person has some influence, right? And it can actually make some things happen. That's awesome. So obviously one of the things that you've dealt with a lot is, folks who are coming from a purely, education and learning space, and now they're getting ready for their first job / opportunity. So what is that prep like for someone who's coming from the book and theory, and preparing them to have, the right look and the right language and approach for that first job?
First job is almost they're the easiest people to consult with because they're an open book. So I love anybody that is a senior in college. They're my favorite people, or has just graduated, because they don't know anything. And so they're a sponge. And so I think the number one thing that you need to think about is trying to create whatever your elevator pitch is going to be. I think that's what people who are fresh out of school struggle with the most, because they've never really had to do that before. And so how are you in 60 seconds going to pitch who you are to a company? I think that's number one, to figure out how you want to brand yourself, right? Are you an athlete who has a passion for numbers, and so you want to spin that into your career in accounting, right? You need to decide what that looks like, and how you talk about the grades you had, and how you talk about how you were able to, balance the career you had as an athlete also with your schoolwork, right? So coming up with your story is number one. I think number two is making sure that you really understand the role you're applying to. Because even though a lot of intro roles, they are pretty much going to teach you what they want you to do at work every day, you still need to find exactly what you're looking for and why you're a different candidate than everyone else, what sets you apart, and why you want that particular role. So that it doesn't just seem like, oh, I just need a, you do. But you want to be able to, be your own, pump yourself up to look like the most attractive candidate, and that you very clearly understand why you want this career and why you want this position, and how that position is going to feed into the rest of your career, right?
Right.
So understand why this puzzle piece fits into what you want to do later on. Go
Yeah.
ahead. Like you're
So
asking something.
yeah, and so I'm thinking now. So if a graduating senior, right, or someone looking for that first job, if they're the easiest, then let's talk about the people who've been around the block a couple times and they've had some experiences. So how do you see the differences with those folks?
The difference is once they've already gone through the process a couple times of getting a couple new jobs, people assume that they know exactly what to do. And the strategies that have worked for you before, you can't assume that it's the same. Even if you were at a company for a year, it's a new hiring team, the job market changes constantly, what people's expectations constantly changing, right? And so you need to be flexible enough to change with the times. And I think that's the thing that people run into when they feel like, well, I've interviewed 1,000 times and the same strategy worked for me before. And it's like, okay, but that was 3 years ago or 4 years ago, or whatever. Time has elapsed. This is a different market. And so you need to change with the times.
Right.
That's the biggest difference I see.
And so it's kind of interesting, right? Because now in the midst of this pandemic, right, which has tipped a lot of things sideways, and a lot of very highly qualified, very experienced people are now looking, for employment. And I personally think, man, the worst time to do that is when a bunch of other folks who could look just like you, have similar backgrounds and tenure and all that, everyone's on the street at the same time, looking for a small number of jobs. So in terms of someone setting themselves apart, and perhaps we can call that differentiation. How do you coach someone to stand out when there's potentially 10, 50, 100, 500 other people with similar experience and background?
I think it starts with how you're putting your resume together. So the thing that people typically do on their resumes is they basically write a job description. They'll say, I'm Stevie, I worked at ABC company, and these are all the things I did, right? Like I hired somebody, and it'll be super general. They don't quantify enough. They really don't go into much detail so that I can understand how they are different. Because if I have two resumes and two people did the exact same job, but I can see that like year over year, somebody increased the employee satisfaction score 20%, and this is how, versus I administered the employee satisfaction survey each year.
Right.
They're very different, but they say the same thing.
Yeah, and it's funny because I had a lot of those conversations with people. So one is I find that people don't keep track of their impact,
No, they don't.
the things that they have done, and so it is very painful sometimes for them to try to go back and quantify because they don't think about their impact, which means they're probably not thinking about their overall value proposition. It's a whole different conversation. And if there was a book I think it's been long since out of print, I've been looking for it occasionally, called Zingers. And the book Zingers was all about what you're talking about, is like, how do you build a resume and tell your story with things that matter? Like, if I give you 100 words on a sheet of paper, but in there's 5 numbers, your eye is going to be drawn to the numbers, right? And so that's a way for people to express kind of what they've done. So you've either you can save money, make people more productive, or something process, but there should be some numerical way to express that minimally. So I think that's an excellent point. So what are you seeing from the clients that you're working with now during the pandemic? Is it different?
No, it's no different. I found that it's still, I guess when you say, is it different, in what way?
So I mean, I guess generally on both sides, right? So in times where, we'll say times of plenty, right? Where there's just tons of opportunity out there, and people could kind of move around a bit more freely. So maybe from the perspective of the job seeker, but also from the appetite and what companies are looking for now that they've had to, maybe look at their talent pool and say we have to get a little bit more lean. So they're not necessarily willing to bring in, they're looking at the ways to average up their talent. So maybe I'm looking at it, Stevie, from both sides of the equation. I know in the role that I'm in, any hiring that I do now, I'm thinking about those things very much more differently than I was probably before, when we were all kind of fat and happy, things are different. So
Yeah. I think on the job seeker side, it's kind of what you already described, right? Like there's a lot of talent out there, which is great. And just the biggest hurdle that people have to jump over is how to make themselves stand out and be different. And I think the reason why I said it's not that different is like the same things kind of reign true, right? If you are referred, then it always helps, regardless of what time of year it is, right? And so you'll see more referrals because there's more people who are on the job market. But in terms of what people are looking for, things have changed because a lot has transpired in the last 12 months, right? And so we've had a social reckoning as a country basically every month. And so a lot, because of that, I see that the way that talent is being looked at by recruiters is different, right? So I think that they were always looking from a D&I lens, but it's definitely different than the way that it was before. And so obviously I say we, even though I'm not a recruiter, but in helping try to think of more unique places for people to find talent. They're far more open to alternative ways to find people to work at companies. That has definitely come forward. And I think the great thing that I'm seeing is so many of my own peers, are being found in unique ways and finding new opportunities, which is great. And I think that the way that recruiting was done before with the very traditional methods of going, the same old places every single time, depending on whatever the organization is, even when it comes to going to like some of these more traditional organizations, right? Your National Black Association, NABA or National Black MBA or any of those are great. They're wonderful places to find people. I was a member of National Black MBA Association, but there's other places to find talent, Black talent besides that, right? And does the degree matter as much? That has been actually, the importance of degrees has been on the past, I would say 3 years, it's been on a decline.
So let's talk about
I owe
that.
a lot of money, so that hurts my soul. But yeah.
So let's talk about that. So here's what you don't know about me. So I did go to college after high school. I wasn't a very inspired student, if that makes any sense. I in some ways I wonder if I was mature enough for college, but really what spoiled it for me was I got an internship with the Navy. So I was in surveillance radar. Working with a bunch of engineers as a computer science and student, and I go back to school and I'm looking around like, oh, none of this stuff is important.
Right.
None of this is going to matter when you get out. And then for really probably more financial reasons, I dropped out, and so I built most of my career up into the executive space without degrees. Now I did it at a time where technology was changing so rapidly that certifications were actually seen as more valuable. Because it was more timely and useful knowledge than someone who had just kind of, frankly, just walked across the stage, right? Wearing a cap and carrying parchment. So I kind of came up that way, and then, just a few years ago, went back and then, knocked out the undergrad, did the MBA, and that was really it was just for stripes on the uniform, Steve. I'm gonna be honest, and I'm a huge fan of education and self-education. I think one of the reasons I've made it as far as I have is that although I left school, I continue to educate myself. And not just in the area of my subject matter expertise, but the other things I needed to know to write well, to speak well. I learned about negotiations, sales, marketing, all those other things that even as a computer science major, they weren't going to teach me that stuff.
Right.
And so I'm kind of really now interested in this and what spaces companies are beginning to de-emphasize the 4-year degree, because we know there's others, like you're not even getting in the door without one. I don't care if it's in basket weaving, you need a degree in something. So talk to me about that.
I mean, there's certain industries where you absolutely do have to, right? Like my doctor needs all of the schooling, right? But I would like for my lawyer to as well, I'm not gonna lie. But I would say,
and perhaps my accountant,
same thing, the bedrock of my life. Those people need to for sure have a degree. But when I think about the marketing space is just completely different than what it used to be, right? It's very different, I think, because of like digital learning really taking off. Everything is different now. You don't need a degree. You know, you can see a million people online today that are making so much money on teaching other people what they've learned about social media and how to beat the algorithm and all that kind of stuff. Like, you don't need to, it changes too rapidly, which is what you were just talking about. It moves too quick for you to have a degree in it. I've worked in digital media when I was at BuzzFeed, and then currently at ViacomCBS being in production. In production, you don't need a degree. You need to understand how the business works and basically kind of jump in and start as early as you can and really just, you know, work your way up. That it involves a different type of skill set. But when I think about digital media and the folks who were over there, I would say it was a mixed bag. Some people had degrees, some people didn't, but primarily it was based on what experiences people had had. For example, when I supported the tech organization at BuzzFeed, all of our engineers didn't necessarily have a degree in engineering. Some of them had gone to, you know, one of these boot camps, so they learned how that way, and maybe they were an intern for us, and then we brought them on, or, you know, we went to their school. We hosted a ton of tech events at BuzzFeed, you know, before the Rona. And so they had a lot of meetups and stuff like that. And so they would meet talent kind of organically in that way. People could pitch themselves and say, you know, I'm coming out of this program, I've worked before, I know what a corporate experience is like, here's what I can bring to the table. So yeah, things are shifting in a lot of industries.
So what importance does self-learning have for you then?
For me, it's huge because I'm always, I like learning. And so I'm always trying to find a new way to better myself or be more organized or, you know, whatever it is. I think that's the key. My dad used to read hours and hours every day. He worked for himself, so that afforded him the ability to do this, right? But I didn't really understand the importance of it until I got out in the world, and I was like, oh, you do constantly need to keep up with whatever the HR trends are. You need to understand how the way that people present information is different. You need to know how to analyze data differently. Like, what do execs want to see now? I need to understand constantly what's going on in the entertainment industry on the TV side. And, you know, while Business Week is amazing and I like to read it from a personal standpoint, just because I want to know what's going on in the world, I need to read Deadline and know what is happening in the world of entertainment on their business side, because that's going to be different and not necessarily covered in that publication. So.
Yeah. So, and clearly I'm a huge advocate of self-learning. And I think today there's just, what do you want to learn? You know, there's YouTube University, as I call it, like what can you not learn or figure out? You know, there's so many platforms now, and even, you know, institutions of higher learning are providing, you know, free classes and online classes. And if people don't have an appetite, then I really believe these are the people that are going to get left behind. And I think we then come to this place where the expectations are a bit unreasonable. And I'm sure in your work that you've met people, right, either in your role as an HR generalist or people who are your clients, who have unreasonable expectations about how things should go. And so I see the look on your face. So when I say that, what pops into your head about people and unreasonable expectations?
I think the most unreasonable expectation is, this is how we've always done it. And okay, but things are moving, right? You got to be able to move with the times. I was talking about this, you know, at the beginning of our conversation, we were talking about, you know, what is the difficulty that people run into when they've been in the career space already for a while and they want to move in some way, you know, make a career change, is you're stagnant in your approach to things. And so if you're not willing to move and grow or take a risk and try something different, then you get, you know, passed up, right? It's like Blockbuster versus Netflix, right? Blockbuster could have bought Netflix. They didn't. And we see what happened there.
Yeah. And it's interesting, you know, I'm in the technology side of it, and we do have, you know, sort of certain technologies we refer to as legacy. You know, so for instance, in financial services and banking, you know, there's still big mainframe, you know, shops with COBOL developers. But anyone starting a bank today is not going to buy a mainframe, right? And so what we're seeing, even with these smaller brokerage houses, there's no mainframes. Everything's in the cloud. But there's have been some people who've been able to camp out, for a long time on those skill sets because those industries have not been able to move away from it quite as quickly. But I think I think those situations are much more rare now. And we're seeing, industry as a whole and companies in particular making those investments to get on more current technology so they can be more fluid and be more agile, and perhaps manage their costs better. And so I think it's a dangerous place for people to be in when they just sort of put their foot down on this is how we've always done it. I think there's a couple of sayings. I think one is sacred cows make great hamburgers or something like that.
There's a new one. Okay.
Yeah, they're gonna get you. The way I say it to my folks is you don't want to be the person trying to domesticate a dinosaur. All right.
Yeah.
Move on. You can't turn them into pets. And so I think that there are even since as you call it, the Rona has come out. It has opened doors of opportunity, right? There are different sets of needs, and I think from zero to capable is not that far, right? If people are willing to invest some time, get out of their own heads and take on a different perspective, there's a ton of opportunity. So anyways, let me get off my soapbox with that. So we talked about self-learning, we talked about creativity, we talked about advocacy. What about the need to cultivate a network?
It's extremely important. It's funny, I went to college with twins who are very successful, and they always would say, networking is one letter away from not working. And then they would say, your network equals yes. And then they would say, your network equals your net worth, which they did not come up with either of these, but.
No, but that first one I hadn't heard before. That one I like, right? I like that one.
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely true, right? I can tell you that my current job and the job before I got through a referral from a friend, the same friend, but that's the most important thing. And we met in school, right? We went to undergrad and graduate school together. So it's extremely, extremely important that the relationships you build speak for you before you get there. It's the same thing of our conversation of advocacy as well at the beginning of our conversation, right? Like, I want people in my corner who I know are successful, and I want them to think that I am too, so that they can then go out in the world and say, hey, this great person, they could potentially do this thing with you, right? And so I think for me, that's why I think I do it less consciously than I did when I was in college, for sure, because I think I was trying to be super meticulous all the time. But just trying to always have an open heart and be open-minded as I enter different social situations, be it professional or not, because you don't know who's in the room, right? And so be open to meet people. I try not to take too seriously or to heart what other people are telling me about someone, because I don't know what my experience with that person is going to be, right? And not from a self-serving standpoint, even just generally, I don't know how I could enhance their life or vice versa. And so I'm always trying to, meet new people. I like to do that. And whether they end up in my network from a professional or a social standpoint, I think that there's a value add for most of the relationships that you build in your life. So keeping that at the forefront, I think, is key.
So do you see then a difference between building your network and, I will say, deploying your network? Or how do you reach into your network and pull out advantage, opportunity, advice?
I think this is going to sound very millennial of me, but it's true, right? Like, I'm in a bunch of different group chats, and so I know which one to go to for different things. So if I need to deploy, a group of professional women in the DC area, right? I'm in a group chat for that. And so I know that I can go to them and say, like, okay, I want to move to DC and these are the areas I'm looking. Who do you know? Who can I reach out to? Who can I send all of you my resume, right? And so I think it's thankfully as easy as that. But if I need to, I've connected with enough people on LinkedIn that I feel comfortable, and have done this when I was shifting careers. Look at a job, look who I know that works there. Or if I see like, we have a second connection in common, I'm never shy to just say, hey, I saw so-and-so, right? Like they work at this company that I'm interested in. Can you please make an introduction? Like I'm never shy to do that. And I think it's probably because I've helped so many people with their career, right? Like either they've paid me to do it now that I have my actual business, or because I mean, obviously with my friends, if they ask me a quick question, I'm not about to charge them. So because I've set my reputation or whatever up in that way, it's an even exchange. And I'm not somebody that really asks for a ton from my network. And so I think that makes it easier when I do make it ask, people are willing to, go the extra mile.
And so I think you said it right there, right? If you want to make withdrawals, you got to be making some deposits.
Oh, yeah.
Somewhere, right?
Yeah,
I mean, I think there's spiritual laws that govern that. So, in totality, it doesn't mean I always have to deposit into this well to take something, but I'm in the totality of your life. I think if you are willing to give and support the dreams and advancements of others, then that help is coming back to you in some way, shape, or form. But
absolutely,
because I think that there's a lot of people that get very tactical at the point that they're looking for an opportunity, and you realize they haven't done any of this work to cultivate a network, which is again not just what you take out, but also what you put in. And so one of the things I say is like, there's no good cooking that happens in a microwave, right? Like some of these things are a process; they have to be cultivated, and it just needs to be something that you do, over time. So walk me through a scenario, Stevie. So I'm in a role. I do this one thing. I've done it for a long time with this company, 10, 15 years. And now, for whatever reason, maybe I'm displaced, maybe I'm dissatisfied. It's time for me to roll out. I got to do something different, but I haven't done a lot of work, right? I haven't cultivated a network. My resume, you could grow flowers in it because there's so much dust on it. Like, what process are you going to walk me through, Stevie?
So step one, you need to figure out what it is you want to do and why, and how can you take your transferable, how can you take what you've done?
No, let me stop you there. I know what I want to do. I want a higher position, making more money.
At your same company.
No. Well, we'll do the in company. We'll talk about the road to promotion. I'm ready to go.
You want to leave?
I'm taking my talent to South Beach. Yeah, I'm
okay. Oh, Lord. Okay. Got it. Okay, so you want to leave. I mean, the first thing you're going to have to do is redo your resume. And so you need to think about every accomplishment that you have made, right? And you need to figure out how you're going to take stock of that. So the thing that I typically tell people to do, what are you about to say? I feel like you're about to.
Yeah, I am. I'm like, you can't just take my current resume and this is what you do. Can't you just take it?
No, I can't. And people always think they could just be like, oh, here's what I have. And I'm like, oh, no, you got to work there's stuff that I make you do before.
So what's your intake process like? And I'm going to say I did this once with someone who I thought wrote a fabulous resume for the time. And it did cost me a fair amount of money, but I think it paid for itself many times over. But she sent me this form, this document to complete, and it was painful.
Yes.
I mean, personally for me, right? Because I was like, maybe I wasn't paying enough attention to what I've been doing, or just the questions were so probing in terms of what I've done, not just what I had done, the impact of those things, the how, right, is a big part of that. Stevie, it was pages and pages. And by the time I finished, I think what I sent back to her might have been a 15 to 18 page document.
Yeah.
Like
where you are in your career, that's not surprising.
Yeah.
That was the correct process, right? Because for me, right, if you're going to work with me, you go to my site, there's an intake form you have to complete, right? It's going to ask you, what do you do now? It's your dream field. What are we working towards? Send me some job descriptions of positions that you're interested in so I can see, and send me what your current resume is. Then you get on the phone with me and I tell you that that's not enough, and that I'm going to require an extended version of your resume, which is all of the questions that you're talking about. I just do it on the phone, right? I'm going to ask you, you've got to dig deep. And it typically takes people about a week to really think through all of the things that they've done, because the resume you have today is not going to work. Otherwise, we would not be having this conversation. So you have to think through literally everything, and you get detailed. And if you send it to me and it's not enough, then we can get on the phone again and I can help you understand more things that I need you to include, because I have to understand what to keep and what to take away. And I can't do that if you say, I filled the water cooler, then I move my stapler on my desk, right? Like, if you have very simple tasks that are on there instead of accomplishments, I can't create a document that's going to help you get the best job.
Right.
And if I don't know what role you're trying to get hired for to figure out what those keywords are, then I can't include those in your resume either.
Right. And do you ever have to tell someone with the information that they have provided to you and that conversation, and then, they follow that up with, these are the jobs that I'd like to pursue? Are you the one that has to tell them, like, what's on this side of the equal sign and this side, these two things don't add up? Like, your experience and skills and the way you represent them does not qualify you for this position. Is that part of to get them to reset those expectations?
I've really only had to do that one time. Thankfully, it was because somebody was deciding between a couple different career paths. And one of them, I'm like, it's going to be a big jump and you're probably going to have to go back and roll, right? So you've gained a certain level of seniority in this track, let's say finance. And so I'm like, okay, but if you want to flip to marketing, that's a bad example because you can't make that switch. But two things that are completely unrelated, right? It's a lot harder to change. And so, yeah, I said, look, you're going to have, if you want to keep the salary that you have, and if that's important, and if maintaining your seniority is important to you, then you need to stay the same track that you're on.
Right.
Versus switching.
Okay. So we've gone through this process, which, and again, I'm thinking about when I went through it. And for people watching,
don't make it seem
yeah,
so
that's
painful.
what I'm saying. I don't want to make it seem like a root canal.
Yeah.
But it is a deep dive,
yes.
right, into your work, your career, and frankly, it's sort of documenting your value proposition. It is necessary. It's easier if you do little bits of it as you go along.
Yes.
As you accomplish things, as you have greater understanding of your impact, if you can keep those things somewhere where they're at the ready, because it's so frankly, I think probably the large majority of people who work a job have to do a review, right? And there's a self-appraisal component of that. So, like for me, those are the things, because that's really my first sort of statement for me. That's where I'm going to have those things documented. So I keep up with them, so I can make sure that, when it's time to look at, increases and things like that, that I can speak to my value proposition. Somehow people can go years and not have any of that, information around. So yeah, it's just necessary, right? Regardless to whether I don't like to do it, but who does? But it's just necessary. But I think that's where someone with your perspective on it, really, that's a lot of the value of it, is helping to guide someone through that process so they're at the highest level of preparedness that they could be for that next opportunity. It's just what you have to, if someone told me I have to replace all 4 tires on my car, I'm not going to want to do that.
Right.
People don't want to slide off the road or, rear end anybody. So we'll suck it up and we'll buy 4 new tires, right? To get them balanced and all that sort of wonderful stuff. So yeah, I'm not trying to poo-poo it, Stevie. I just remember last time I had to do it.
Yeah.
But it is work. But if that, and maybe the difference for people who have a job versus a career. If you have a career, you understand the value of this particular pivot and what you have to do. So you have job descriptions. We have an updated resume. So what's the coaching part of it look like as we prepare for interviews and that sort of thing? How does that go?
If I do a mock interview, it's a similar intake process. I still need your resume. I need to know what resume you submitted. If there's any other documents, I want you to send me those as well, that were a part of your application, so that I understand. And then I need to see the job description as well, because then I need to do a lot of preparation in terms of researching the company. What does their financial statement look like? If it's public, understanding if you're doing like a social media marketing position, right? I'm going to look at, what do your socials look like? If you've done any other companies, what do those look like? What's the current state of what this new company looks like? And how do you think you can make those changes, right? So I'm coming up with what what the company I think they're going to ask you based on whatever the position is. Also, obviously, checking out Glassdoor, salary.com.
Right. And so this goes back to, again, my first understanding of who you are is,
this
seeing
is what I
you
do.
actually do that. I was like, yeah, that right there. That's it. But you spoke rather quickly through the work that you have to do to prepare to walk someone through a mock interview, right? And it can be a lot. So I do want you to speak to that, because I think when folks go to someone like you, they think they're going to see Miss Chloe, like a psychic, like you're just going to, just
like I'll just know.
your head. It's like, you should just like know.
Yeah.
So, and maybe it's the same points, maybe you can speak about it differently, but that prep and how you now, and have to get yourself prepared to help this person. How much time are you spending to help someone prepare for, a mock interview?
So for a mock interview, it's going to take at least 2 hours, because it's probably, people come to me from all industries. And so typically it's something that I have never worked in before. And so I have to gain a general understanding of what it is they're trying to do, and then the job itself. And then I have to understand the person, right? So those 3 components take a lot of time, and I have to deep dive because I don't want to phone it in, right? Like, people are paying me. And so it's not something that I take lightly. And so doing the company research and really sitting down to understand what does their performance look like? What do people say about them? I really take time to look at the reviews, and understand the company culture, because being in HR, I do understand what an important piece culture fit is. And I think a lot of people discount that, but it is very imperative when people are making hiring decisions, for better or worse. And so taking time with the individual is with that first intake call, so that when I receive their information, when you sign up on my site, I will look through everything and understand, what does your LinkedIn profile look like? Like, what's the package of you that they said, okay, we want to talk to this person. Like, I need a holistic understanding of that, and understand what your conversation with the recruiter was like. Because by the time you get to me, you've already talked to the recruiter. So your last round of interviews.
Yeah, I mean, unless someone's at the very beginning of the process, right? And you're taking them through
usually they hit me middle end.
Right. And I think, and to the point of what you said, and again, in that first interaction, there was no way for me to tell that you didn't have a deep background in healthcare, right? Which was the subject matter expertise, especially in that space, right? Dealing with these plans and, markets and proposals and contracts. Because I look at some of that stuff and I have to deep dive and ask a lot of questions. It's a ton of acronyms. Like, I would have never known, Stevie, that was not your area of expertise. That's how well it was handled. So kudos to you for the prep work that you do for that. So that's on that side of it. So now within my own company, I want to promote.
You want to move up.
I want to move up. I want the big chair.
Your role?
7 years.
That is a substantial amount of time. So my question would be, why after 7 years do you want to move up?
Because I should be in charge, Stevie. I mean, it's just the next thing for me.
And I would say that's not enough, right? Like, you need a very clear understanding of why it is you want to move forward.
Well, and so I answered it that way because I know that there are folks, because I've been.
That's how they come to me.
People come to me. It's like, I'm ready for this management role, and they think it's their turn and they're up next. And, people don't come with the fact that they believe that, so here's the way I look at it, right? So this is, my value proposition. This is what I've been able to do, accomplish, contribute, and bring to, the goals and objectives of the company. And I am really believing that at a higher level of influence, that I can then broaden that, right? And that gets to, and again, mine is directly over technology strategy, but also people. And so for me, it's that opportunity to now be able to deposit into more people, for their professional development and continue to average up the talent. And so for the seats that I've been in and want to occupy, it's all those things. So I just believe that at a higher, I can better serve the overall mission of the company from this seat better than I can from this seat. But again, I get it's my turn. People know that it comes with more money. There's some real superficial things
Yeah.
that people bring up. So hence the reason I asked. And it's funny
Right.
you say 7 years, but it depends. Like in certain areas, like again, where I came from in banking, because the industry is so large, the institutions are so big,
Right.
the
Right.
projects have a really long life cycle to them. Like a project you're on could reasonably be a 3 to 5 year project, and
Yeah.
implementation could be 18 months. So by the time you get to 7 years, that's really only 3 times around the track for some. So in some industries, it's not
In some industries, yes, you're absolutely right.
it's not it's not that long. It's 7 years. They're like, oh, you almost ready.
Right.
Serious? No, I'm dead serious.
No, I know I believe me, I know. Because I've worked in multiple industries. I'm like, I know that's definitely a true statement.
Mhm.
Um, I think you can't just jump up in one day and be like, I need to be making more money. Or you find out how much your buddy in the same industry is making, and you're like, oh, I should be making more, right? It needs to be a very clear, compelling reason as to why you need to move forward. Is it because you had a big win? You've had consistent wins over the last 7 years, or you can, very clearly show your growth over, an extended period of time, and that you've gone over and above with your goals. Then okay, now we can have a conversation about why you're ready to move forward. Because most people come to me and they're like, I did everything on my goals list. I'm like, okay, well, did you do anything extra? Because that's what's going to differentiate you from everybody else that's moving forward. And you might not see it, but that's typically what's happening.
Yeah, I'm also not a fan of promotion as a sort of like a graduation sort of thing.
Oh, but
It,
so many
it,
people operate like that.
yeah, I mean, and so, oh yeah, but that's really how how people look at it, and I think that can be problematic, right? The one is that perspective is going to leave them miserable, right? Because they don't understand maybe the non-answers that they're getting or the no's that they're getting, again, as opposed to advancing their value proposition and really how can they better contribute. But you also said something else. The person who does exactly what they're asked is going to stay exactly where they are.
Yeah.
Right. It's the person who's thinking ahead and solving the problems. And when everyone steps back, they step forward. And the person who is willing to demonstrate that they just have an inclination to contribute differently. I think that a person who truly deserves the promotion is a person who's already doing some aspect of that next role anyway.
Yes.
And so the
Yeah.
promotion is really just helping them to have, again, the proper way to influence at that level, and then the commensurate compensation that goes with it. But I don't think that
Right.
people just promote, again, it's like going from middle school to high school. Like let me just say this.
It's not automatic. Well,
I'm
to be
not. I'm not
fair,
a fan. I'm not
go
a
ahead.
fan of kids graduating from kindergarten into like it just nonsense. Stop that. But there's, but there's a lot of those events that happen with people, and then if you've been around large cultures and organizations the way that I have, you see people who've sort of been like part of the No Child Left Behind programs, and they get into these levels. It's like you have no godly business here,
Being here, correct.
right? So now you're a problem for the organization, the people who are above you, to the side of the people below you. So that thing is like my turn, I'm up next. I'm not feeling that. So, but anyway, again, soapbox.
Corporations used to operate that way.
Oh,
And
yeah.
you get people who tell their children that, and then they get in the workplace and they expect the same thing, right? I mean, it hasn't been that way for a very long time, but people don't want to let go of that notion. And in some industries, that is still how things,
I was just about to say, go to financial
it's not
services,
all the
go to
way
some of
gone.
these. Yeah,
It's not all the way gone. It's
it's,
not.
it's not even near all the way gone.
No, no. But
Um,
if you are not you need to be in a position of privilege on a lot of different fronts for your career to move forward like that. And
mhm,
99% of people do not have that on their side. That's
right,
really what the difference is now.
right,
Um, 'Cause it's not, the way that it operates is very different, particularly in corporate spaces. It's different.
right.
You can't get away with that quite like you used to.
Agreed. And because companies are forced to look at things differently, right? Again,
Yes.
just the constant flow of easy money coming in the door is look a little bit different as their customers and markets and all these sectors have changed. Companies have to change, therefore the talent has to change to be able to really align with where these corporations and businesses, small, medium sized, whatever, need to go. I think that the calling card for all of us has changed quite a bit. So,
Yeah.
so that said, so I've held you for quite a minute here. So I can't even tell you how much I appreciate the things that you've shared with Pivot Play. We always want to leave some breadcrumbs for people, things that they can think about and implement to really move their life and their goals and their mission ahead. So thank you so much for your contribution today, Stevie.
Yeah. Thanks
Yeah.
for inviting me. This is great.
Yeah. So so do me a favor and tell folks where they can find you.
Yes, you can find me on my website is Stevie L, is my middle initial for Lynn, Coleman.com. If you want to work with me, you click the work with me tab. It'll be on the upper left-hand side when you go there and you can see what services I offer. If you want to do just a general discovery call with me, you can fill out an intake form. It's $50 for 30 minutes. I'd be happy to have a conversation with you to just understand what your goals are. And that'll be applied to whatever service you decide to move forward with. Should we decide to work together, you can find me on my socials. I'm most active on Instagram. It's Stevie, the number 1, Wonderful. So yeah.
Okay. So what she really said was find her on Instagram, find her on her website. This is the end of the free advice. Just don't ask. I'm just
A one-off question. I have no problem answering a one-off question, but an expensive question is different.
Yeah, it's just funny. I'll say this in our intake. Well, intake. I'm using that word now. That wasn't it. But in our phone conversation the other day, that's one of the things that I think we both laughed at. Is sometimes people ask you a really expensive question,
Yes.
right? And they don't understand how expensive that question is. It comes out it comes in casual packaging, but it's really an expensive question, right?
It
And
does.
you
And I
digging
would
that
say
deep in
to
the well.
you, that was such a great question. I'd love to talk with you more. You can go to stevielcoleman.com/work with me and we can talk more.
That's awesome. Hey, so folks, again, check Stevie out, not just on the career stuff, but also on the beauty tip as well. She is doing a ton of things. And just keep in mind that the project on the table is your life. If you don't work on it, no one else will. See you, folks.